leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage.
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 The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
As president 40 days after the inauguration to the joint houses of Congress. It isn't yet a State of the Union speech, it's an address to a joint session. And he's going to say a lot tonight, laying out his programme, and perhaps we'll get some assessment from him as to how he's done in the first 40 days as the 45th president of the USA. But there were some hints. Earlier on today, he was interviewed on Fox and Friends this morning. This is what he said.
I think in terms of effort, which means something, but I give myself an A+. Okay, effort, but that's, you know, results are more important. In terms of messaging, I would give myself a C or a C+.
Why?
So my messaging isn't good. When I see a story about Donald Trump didn't fill hundreds and hundreds of jobs, it's because in many cases we don't want to fill those jobs.
You have 600 open jobs, though, that you can appoint. What's going on?
Well, a lot of those jobs I don't want to appoint because they're unnecessary to have. You know, we have so many people in government. Even me, I look at some of the jobs, and it's people over people over people. I say, what do all these people do? You don't need all those jobs. Now, they'll be filled.
You're cutting.
Oh,
those slots are not going to be.
You know, it's funny. That's what I mean about messaging. You have to fill hundreds of jobs.
No idea that you didn't want to fill them.
Oh, many of those jobs I don't want to fill. I say, isn't that a good thing? That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We're running a very good, efficient government. Now, in terms of achievement, I think I'd give myself an A, because I think I've done great things, but I don't think I and my people, I don't think we've explained it well enough to the American public. I think I get an A in terms of what I've actually done, but in terms of messaging, I'd give myself a C or a C+.
All right, how are you going to change that then?
Well, maybe I change it during the speech.
Well, there we are. That is the prelude to what's to come later. He gives himself an A or an A+ for effort. I tell you what, I can certainly confirm that. He has a work rate that is simply unbelievable. But he marks himself down in terms of messaging. Now, this, of course, partly is to do with his ongoing row with the media, in particular CNN. And his accusation that they put out fake news. By the way, interestingly, the BBC is in the same category. And I don't know whether you saw the big press conference last week, but he'd attacked CNN. And John Sopel from the BBC put his hand up, started asking a question. And Trump said, which organisation are you from? And John Sopel said, the BBC. He said, oh, that's another beauty. So he's pretty sceptical about the media. And I wonder whether, the fight with the media, the row with the media, has perhaps stopped him getting that message through. So what I'm asking you tonight is, has he been a star pupil, or is he the class troublemaker? And please let me know what you think. Start marking now on 0345 60 60 973. Text your grades to 84850. You can score him by tweeting at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can look at LBC's Facebook page where you can watch this show live. And I'm going to go to James in Hull. How is Donald Trump doing? What grade would you give him?
I'd give him a solid A for effort, but when it comes down to the media, it's got to be a C or a D, I'm afraid.
Well, so you're agreeing with him. I mean, he himself, actually, today was being quite self-deprecatory, wasn't he, by marking himself down. What's he getting wrong, James?
To be honest with you, I think it's not necessarily the way he's acting among himself. I think it's more... the issue resolves more with the people he's dealing with rather than the way he's dealing with them. He's come to a point where he's saying to CNN, I don't trust you. And CNN are not doing any kind of response or any kind of backing down. So I think there's going to have to be a point where everyone's going to have to cool it and actually come together at some point. Because it's going to get worse. If the guy wants to run again in 2020, it's not going to happen if this carries on.
Well, James, I tell you, I can remember back in this country in the sort of late 1980s when the Thatcher government was literally at war with the BBC, and Norman Tebbit was the sort of pugilist-in-chief taking on the BBC, accusing them of bias. So it's not unknown for governments to have fights with traditional media. I think the difference, James, is this. I think that Trump feels that he can have a fight with traditional mainstream broadcasters because in America he's got talk radio, which is absolutely massive in every single state and still growing. But he's also got Facebook and Twitter and everything else. And the last time I looked, Trump had 16 million followers on Twitter, which means his messages go round the back of traditional media. So perhaps, James, having a punch-up with CNN and the others doesn't matter quite as much as it would have done 10 years ago.
The thing with the Twitter and that is you come down to a point where you're actually reading articles written about tweets he's made. I mean, it's quite pathetic in that regard. So, I mean, the news source is actually Twitter at this point. It's absolutely madness. I've never seen anyone like this. It's down to the point where people are responding to tweets by writing articles. No,
James, no one's ever seen anything like this. That's the point about the Trump presidency. I guess it's why the whole world is so fascinated. And, you know, anybody that advises the president that he should give up tweeting at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever time he does it, they're wasting their time. He's a 70-year-old self-made man. He's done everything his way, and he's not going to change now. James, thank you. James making the point that Trump isn't getting it right, in his view, with the media. I wonder what Will from Evesham thinks. How is the Donald doing?
Well, I think he's got to have an F for fake news, isn't he? Because, I mean, you know, I think he sums it up himself. I mean, he doesn't... When he dismisses the kind of mainstream media, well, he doesn't mind having his biased right-wing sources, whether it's Breitbart or Fox News, his friendly sources. Anybody who kind of challenges him when he comes out with his, you know, total rubbish on many issues. You know, look at his comment about Sweden, you know, and you followed that up with some more rubbish as well, didn't you? I mean, it was actually embarrassing at one point where you got a commentator on Fox News talking on behalf of Sweden, the Swedish government, saying we don't know who this chap is. Yeah, and that's the problem with Donald Trump. F for fake news, because he has not even once identified a fact that says that is wrong. Clearly, there's many facts he said was wrong.
Well. I mean, Will.
He was elected. I mean, when he was talking about the people who his inauguration. I mean, he started off with a complete lie, didn't he?
Did he get Sweden wrong, Will? Well, you could say that specifically by saying, look what happened in Sweden yesterday, he was wrong. But was he right in terms of his direction of travel? Was he right that there's been a dramatic change in Sweden over the course of the last few years, with rape increasing by 1,600%? He was right about that, wasn't he?
Actually, no. I think you just need to check your facts there, Nigel. There's been a decline, actually. There's a technical way in terms of the way Sweden measure their rate before, or in terms of their sector. No, I'm sorry. Why don't you check?
Well, let me tell you, Will. I used to do business in Sweden in the 1990s. It was the most relaxed, laid-back place. I've been to all those big Swedish cities, and crime didn't even register with me as being a problem. There has been an issue there. So, Will, you think that Trump has a problem with the truth. You say that he lines up with Breitbart and Fox, but Will, let me tell you, you know, Tony Blair had his friends in the press. David Cameron had his friends in the press. Kind of, isn't that the way things work? But Will, what would you give him for effort? What?
Neither of those characters. I mean, George W. Bush. I mean, he had his friends in the press, but as he said only this morning, what they didn't do was attack the idea of a fundamental free press to have a president of the United States attacking the free press, which is a cornerstone of any democracy. That's appalling.
Well, if the traditional free press displayed a bit more neutrality, rather than putting themselves as the opposition, perhaps there'd be less of it. Well, I understand your point of view. I just get a feeling that the world's changed a bit. Your text, hello Nigel, I grade Donald J. Trump A***. That's from Anna Young from Swiss Cottage. A tweet, I would give Trump an F grade for fossil fool. That comes from Jakey, so a few emotions coming in here. Give him an F for fake news. He makes up his homework and doesn't research his sources. I'll give Trump an A star if he blows the lid on the Bilderberg group, Nigel. Had he mentioned anything like this to you in your meeting, Sean from Bicester? I'm not telling any of you what he said in his meetings to me. What I am telling you is he's working very, very hard, and he is determined that he's going to put the platform upon which he was elected into practice. Jim from Hounslow, is Trump the star pupil, or is he the class troublemaker?
Hi, Nigel. I just want to say I think he's an A-star guy. I just want to say as well, thank you for doing everything you did for our country. Much appreciated. Without you, would be much more trouble.
Well, Jim, that's fine. So is Trump A-star for effort? But I mean, what about this issue that perhaps his fight with the media means he's not necessarily getting his messages through?
Well, I think he's got a problem with the media. He's flagged up with all the fake news, and there's so much fake news around these days, so much biased media. They're not interested in doing their job of delivering a fair assessment of the situation. They just print the press releases they're told to by the government or the department. They're talking about. So from that point of view, he's doing a great. They're fighting government corruption. No one's mentioned it, but he's the only person who's banned government employees from taking contracts within their speciality for 5 years after.
Yes, he has. He has. This is part, Jim, of him draining the swamp, isn't it? And I have to say, I think he does deserve plaudits for doing that. I absolutely agree with that.
Absolutely. And also, he's actually delivering results. I mean, every other politician talks about how much money they're going to spend of our money and how much money they're going to take from us. Yep. They never tell us what they're actually going to do with it, or if they do, they never produces anything. And he's actually talking about things he actually does that are of benefit to the country or his country.
Well, Jim, thank you for those points. And interestingly, I thought, when he said, well, there are 600 posts you haven't filled, Mr. Trump. Well, I'm not going to fill them all. There are too many overpaid people in government. I have to say, I find that really rather refreshing. Right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively here on LBC, and it's 7:15.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
He's 40 days in to the presidency. He's giving a big speech later on today to the joint houses of Congress. And he, earlier on today, marked himself and said he gives himself an A for effort, but just a C for communications. And I just wonder, tomorrow being the start of Lent, whether perhaps Trump should give up attacking the traditional mainstream media in the way that he does. If he did that, would he get his message across better, or are they enemies of the people, as he called them just a few days ago? Is it that is stopping him getting his message out? And your Facebook messages, Sean Crawford says, Trump is only doing what he said he was going to do all along. Hear, Sean, I agree with that, and he will go on doing that. Whether you like it or not, he'll go on doing that. Jethro says on Facebook, Trump will be the best USA president in history. Do your research and see his 100-day plan. Interesting. Now, I've got Jamie from Leicester, who is 17 years old. What is your view, Jamie, of Donald J. Trump? Grade him from A to F, please.
Well, hello there, Nige. I would put him personally a D-.
Right.
He's not been the most awful president he could have been. I respect the fact that he's stuck to his promises, even if they're things I disagree with. But he's done a number of things that I just cannot stand. So, for example, he's been a hypocrite in multiple senses, slamming leaks against him when he applauded them against Hillary. He has cracked down on countries which he has no reason to crack down to, countries where almost no one has committed terrorist attacks against the US. He has also repealed the Endangered Species Act for virtually no reason other to save money, which he's now spending in a gross amount on the military. And he's done a whole range of things and just not acted in a presidential way at all.
But, Jamie, what's interesting is there are tens of thousands of jobs every month coming back into America. Surely that's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, given the fact that the US is the biggest economy in the world and has some 350 million people, 10,000 jobs a week is really a normal number you would expect. Maybe that would be a big number if you're talking about a country like Belgium or Liechtenstein, But the USA is just not a particularly large amount.
Well, Jamie,
of
there are some people, who would say that as many as 300,000 jobs have come back into America since November the 8th because he's the president and he's going to be on the side of business and make their lives a bit easier. Now, I can't...
Well, I mean, that's a direct contradiction then, because during the election, your side, the Trump side, was saying, oh, big business is for Hillary, big business is for the Democrats. But now you're saying that big business is going to the US because of Trump.
No, here's the difference, Jamie.
No legislation whatsoever to do so.
Jamie, here's the difference. There is a difference between the big corporates, which in America and the European Union seem almost to own government these days and write their own rules for their industries, and what Trump is saying is he's on the side of the small and medium-sized business. He's going to massively reduce business legislation, and in terms of energy for manufacturers, he's going to bring down the price of energy. And the Green Brigade don't like it very much. But
the only way he's bringing down energy prices is by cracking down on green energy and bringing us back into coal, bringing us back into oil and natural gas, which, as efficient as they may be and as cheap as they may be, in the long term, that's just going to create more fossil fuels. And as good as that may be for business, it's not good for the country.
Jamie, do you think, is there anything Trump could do that would change your mind?
Well, I mean, I did say just after he elected, maybe I'll give him a chance. But I've been impressed with very little he's done so far. The only thing I can think of, which I approve of, is the fact that the TTP is now dead.
Yep.
Although even then it was dead for months afterwards because of hard work of left-wing campaigners, not Trump, who merely just rubber-stamped what they had already done.
Well, he's also got rid of the Trans-Pacific deal as well, hasn't he?
Well, that as well. But again, that was due to campaigners and their work, not specifically just him.
And Jamie, Jamie, just one last question for you. You know, amongst your contemporaries at school or college, I mean, do they all think like you about Trump?
Well, I mean, I can't say there's a huge amount of political interest, which is sad. I do know one or two people who have these crazy views about Trump, that there's going to be some nuclear war with China, and even I can criticise some of the ridiculous things they say. But most of them have a negative view of Trump, and of course, I can't exactly criticise.
Well, Jamie, as somebody who's a bit older than you, I will just say this to you: whether you like or don't like what he's done, and your views are clear, the one thing I find really refreshing is that he's got an absolute commitment. He feels it as a moral commitment to put into law the things that he promised the electors during that campaign. And I have to say, Jamie, after years and years of seeing people getting elected on absolutely false promises, that, I think, in democratic terms, is hugely refreshing. Thank you very much indeed for your call. A text here, A+, and I reckon it's only gonna get better. The press gets an F for unnecessarily battering him. Trump is an overrated clown who speaks without knowing the facts. Grade U, that's Ali. F was the lowest, actually, but never mind. I can't see Trump doing 4 years. Reagan was a pleasant man who could communicate and gather good people around him. Trump hasn't a clue, says Richard Harroway. Well, I'm going to take slight issue with you there, Richard. If you look at the people that Trump has been appointing, you know, part of his top team, the thing that is fascinating is hardly any of them have ever been in elected politics. They're not the sort of dullards that we're used to seeing in Brussels and in Westminster. These are people who've risen to the rank of general in the Marine Corps, in the Army. They're people who've risen to the top in business. Some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them who've done it through big companies. And I have to say, if you look at the general level of expertise and success he's built around him, I think it's unprecedented in modern times. I wonder what Sarah in Hackney makes of Donald J. Trump.
Hello?
Hello. What does he get? What grade does he get, Sarah?
I think he gets F.
He gets F, does he? Right. OK. What, for achievement, yeah?
No, not for achievement at all. I think he's highly narcissistic and he's quite dangerous. And actually, he's taking on everybody and they're criticising him and he's having a go at them. That's pretty standard for these people. If we don't really know what his agenda is, but you look back some time, he used Roy Cohn as one of his top attorneys. Do you remember?
I do.
You know what Roy Cohn was like, don't you?
No, go on, say more.
Oh, I didn't go into it. I mean, you know the name he had. and all the rest of it, and how he was struck off. And yet he thought he was wonderful.
Well, you know, there's nobody that rises to the top in business or politics that doesn't meet, along the way, a few people who prove not to be particularly good eggs. But, Sarah, I mean, do you just not like him as a person? Is that what it's really all about?
No, I just think that he shows himself as slightly unstable. You don't argue with people the way he's arguing and grimacing and all the rest of it. I mean, prior to him getting in, the stuff he was saying about Hillary Clinton. Then we have the Russians being involved, all sorts of obfuscation. I'm not sure that nobody knows what's going on.
I think, Sarah, to be honest, I was there for much of that campaign, and I went to the debates, and I think, to be honest, that both sides said pretty awful things about each other. And it was a pretty, at times, unedifying campaign. So, Sarah, should we suggest to him that for Lent he stops attacking mainstream media and concentrates purely on the policies?
He has to stop attacking people and get on with it. And also, you don't tell another country to build a wall and they'll pay for it. You just don't do that.
Well,
you have to be careful with Russia. They're expanding.
Sarah, he is unconventional in every sense. But I tell you what, he is going to build that wall. And do you know something? The Mexicans will pay for it. Do you know why? Because 1 million of them, every single day, legally cross the border, and he will tax them for doing it, just as if I used the Dartford crossing to go to Essex. Sarah thinks he's unpresidential and narcissistic. I've got another Sarah. Sarah in Tunbridge. What grade do you give Donald J. Trump, Sarah?
Well, I've got two. It could be either D for dangerous or B for very dangerous.
Why is he dangerous, Sarah? Tell me.
I'd like to speak about, and you didn't disabuse this chap, and as you know Trump so well, you will know when the guy said, he said he's not going to have lobbyists for 5 years, anyone who's worked in government or around that area, which is a brilliant idea.
Mm.
But his very own first campaign manager, Corey, I hope I pronounce his last name right,
Lewandowski, yeah. Go on, yeah.
Oh, him?
Yeah.
He has opened a political lobbying firm in D.C. already. Now, you can call it what you like. He says it's not, but that's what it is. He's going to introduce business people to the government, etc. And that he's calling it something else. I forget what. But that's what he is.
Yes, but he wasn't working for government, was he? He wasn't working for government. He was working as part of Trump's team. And what Trump is saying...
Well, he's going to end up... He has an amazing influence, which is what I presume Trump was trying to get away from with having lobbyists. He is just like all the rest. Apart from being a liar and everything else, you said he's unconventional.
He is.
For a bully, he's very typical. I think he's very typical of the type. He's very stereotypical, and he is a bully, and there's nothing unconventional about that.
It's B for bully, it's D for dangerous, and Sarah in Tunbridge does not think too much of Donald J. Trump. Sarah, I got the message loud and clear, and on Facebook, Kevin Cooney says, why are we afraid of change? Give us a C-, Nigel. He is a refreshing change. Well, look, he marked himself down, didn't he? He said himself he's not getting his messages out there. He's promising something spectacular is going to happen with his speech to Joint Congress tonight. He's promising us that it's gonna be great. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively here on LBC. It's 7:30, and time for the news with Rupert Bartier.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's the big Trump speech tonight to the joint houses of Congress, and he's been assessing his own performance in his first 40 days as president, giving himself an A-star for effort, but only a C for communication. And we're saying, are these persistent fights with the media, the mainstream media, are they actually stopping him getting his messages out? Talking of controversy, I think I've been involved in a bit of controversy today with my comments about Douglas Carswell. And I'm not going to use this platform to say any more. I've said what I'm going to say. We have a rather different view on the policies that should matter for UKIP. Other politicians making the news today. Well, after the referendum, do you remember David Cameron? He walked out into Downing Street and he resigned. And even though I'd been his bitter opponent, just a little bit of me on a human level, felt ever slightly sorry for him and his family. But the bloke next door, the bloke in number 11, Osborne, didn't even have the guts to leave by the front door. He snuck out the back door. And I said I hope we'd never see his pasty face again in public life. But just like John Major yesterday, he's popped up and he's warned us against leaving the European Union without a trade deal. Please be quiet. Get thee gone. We don't want to know. You lost. The war is over. And on a slightly lighter note, it is Lent starting tomorrow. And Theresa May is giving up crisps for Lent. She's confessed that salt and vinegar is her favourite flavour. It's mine, actually. And she's going to give them up for Lent. What are you going to give up for Lent? Well, I've decided to do really something quite big this year. And it's not going to be easy, but I'm giving up sweets for Lent. I haven't eaten one for years, so we'll be fine. Right, now, back to the question. Donald J. Trump, is he top of the class? Is he a star? Or is he a clown and a buffoon? What is he, Ibrahim, in Slough?
I think it's the latter, mate. I think he's a bit of a buffoon, to be honest.
Do you?
I know you're a massive fan of him. What I don't get with you, Nigel, you're a very smart man. I rate you in terms of what you've done, right? I didn't agree with your views at first, and there's certain things I don't agree with you. Especially, I was let down by you, because I was a fan of yours, I'll be honest.
Right.
And I was let down by you on one matter, and after that, I kind of lost faith in you, which, I'll be completely honest, was regarding the immigration poster. I didn't like the way it was sort of publicised and the way it was 1 week before the referendum it's come out, and it was wrong. The message was wrong in that. I get your message, the wider message, but using that specific photograph, I personally didn't agree with you. I mean, we could have a discussion for half an hour based on that.
Well, we could, but we're not talking about my faults, Ibrahim, which are many, I know. But we're talking about Donald Trump. So you know, if you really wanted to talk about my flaws, it'd take the whole show and more. You know,
it would. I'll take till midnight at least. I'd say.
But what about Trump? Come on.
Look, I'm not a fan of Trump.
No.
You know. Completely honestly speaking, he's a very good, smart businessman. He knows what he's bloody doing, and he knows how to get people's votes. He knows how to do that. He's a businessman. At the end of the day, people have needed a change, and I agree.
Yes.
We've had the same old faces, policies, a couple of different policies here and there, but nevertheless, it's been the same. And people have thought, right, enough's enough. You know, it's coming to this point. We need a change. And that's why people like him appeal to people, the wider audience. And he's cast, votes from people that America literally ignored.
Yes. Oh, yes.
In far Texas, etc.
Yeah, the left behinds, Ibrahim.
Left untouched.
The left behinds, the left behinds in the Midwest and elsewhere, and he targeted that vote, and that's why he won. But Ibrahim, surely one good thing, Ibrahim, is that he actually likes our country and wants our countries to get closer. Isn't that a good thing?
No. That is a good thing. I agree with that. It is a good thing having it close. But what I don't agree with, Nigel, is we've always... I rate, the country I live in, and I love it. I completely, I adore it. And I wouldn't want to live elsewhere. The only thing is, we don't need to be America's puppet. And for the past, I'm not saying we are.
No.
We have shown in the past, Tony Blair and many other cases, that we are your puppet, America. We're your poodle. Anything you do, we'll nod our heads to if that's what's needed. That I don't agree with. We don't need to do that. We should be proud of our own our own country, our own laws, our own measures, and we should have our own headway on
Ibrahim, actually, we've been Brussels' puppet for 40 years because they've been making 75% of our laws. You're right on foreign policy. When they said jump, Tony Blair did ask too high, and no one's proposing that. And I'm not proposing we leave the European Union to become the 51st state of the USA, but I do think that a good, close relationship with them, and indeed many other parts, Ibrahim, of the English-speaking world, puts us in it.
Nigel?
Go on then.
One question.
Go on then. This is going to be a hard one, isn't it?
Carefully. Yeah, please answer it's a simple question,
okay.
But answer it very, very carefully.
Okay.
Please. What I want to ask you is, do you genuinely, hand on heart, believe there's no one in America that can do a better job than Trump?
Well, I tell you what I believe, absolutely hand on heart, Ibrahim, is that Donald J. Trump will do a damn sight better job than Hillary Clinton ever would have done. And I think he will shake up the government in the country. I think he will deregulate and give men and women the chance to get their small businesses off the ground. And I think he will bring back, over his term, huge numbers of jobs to those left behind people in the Midwest. And Ibrahim, no one's perfect, but I tell you what, this man, he didn't need to do this, did he? He's a very wealthy 70-year-old man. He's done it out of a sense of duty. And I accept that he's unconventional, and I accept that sometimes, he might misquote something a little bit, but I do believe he's absolutely sincere and genuine in this call. But Ibrahim, great call. Thank you. Your text messages coming in. Where did you get this phony information that thousands of work is coming to America? Trump is a bully, uneducated, vulgar man. I'm sorry for America. Hillary was the right candidate. It's a pity she lost. Again, I'd say the same as I just said to George Osborne. The war is over. Evening, Nigel. I find Trump a tremendous breath of fresh air for the Western world. What a change for an elected leader to actually carry out his electoral promises. 2017 will be a great historical year. President Trump should refrain from tweeting. It's a persistently narcissistic way of publicising himself and undermines himself, seemingly makes him looking less mature and credible as a world leader. Mark from Putney. Mark, he's not going to stop tweeting, right? This is how he does it. It may be unconventional. He's not changing. We're going to get a more international view. No American callers yet. Why not? We know there are people in the States listening to this show. I'd love to hear from them. But we go to Sebastian in Bern in Switzerland. Good evening, Sebastian.
Good evening, Mr. Farage, and nice talking to you.
So what grades does he get from you, Sebastian?
Okay, like you said, I think that an A is perfect. A plus, even, if you want. Because I'm a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
I also think that he can continue tweeting, but he should stop tweeting about media and stuff. He just should ignore them. Because as long as you give some response to somebody, may it be negative or positive, you will always get back response.
So, Sebastian, you're sort of agreeing with the proposition I put out at the top of this programme, that perhaps this sort of pitch battle that is going on between him and CNN and the BBC, perhaps he's taken that a bit too far, yeah?
Yes, exactly. Because ignoring is the best thing, also in personal life. You just ignore the stuff and people will get off you.
Yeah. But other than that, you think he's got the right agenda, he's doing the right thing?
Yes, absolutely. I think also that people, they lack common sense, People come up with stories that what he did when he was a businessman, he was buying Samsung TVs for his hotels, and now he wants job back in America, People, they lack common sense. That's the main issue.
OK, Sebastian, thank you very much indeed. I wonder what Shahid in Hemel Hempstead think. What mark do you give this president, Shahid?
I'll give him an F for fail, because unlike that previous caller, I know that the American president has to go through the Congress to get anything passed with the full weight of law.
Yes.
Barack Obama, the first thing he done was get an economic stimulus bill. He got it passed really quickly. Then he moved on to the health care. And that healthcare took about 18 months to pass because the Republicans slowed him down and played him along. All that Trump is doing is making executive order announcements, but that is not going to get nothing fully done. And he's just playing some sort of spin campaign. On his travel ban, to put it politely, he's being generalising against Muslim countries. He's saying, Obama drew up this list, but Obama didn't say put a ban on those people. He just said extra scrutiny. And it does take a long time to go through the vetting process anyway. And if he's really concerned about American safety, if I was the American president or even a senator, I'd be saying guns kill tens of thousands of Americans every single year. The days of the people being armed right, they go back to the days of the sheriff with a few deputies. Long gone are those days. We've got the FBI, we've got, other agencies, the Army, the National Guard. We do not need everyone to be armed.
I mean, the truth is, Shahid, the truth is, it really wouldn't have mattered very much whether the Republicans or Democrats had won. The thought of a major crackdown on guns in America, frankly, culturally is unthinkable. I just think it would happen. And I would say this to you, that you're quite right, that Obama drew up the list of these 7 countries. Already America has, a pretty stiff form of vetting, and all that Trump was trying to do was for 90 days to say, just give me time to look at Obama's rules to see whether they're strict enough. And I honestly, I honestly think that particular aspect has been slightly exaggerated. But Shahid, I thank you very much. So school's out in 15 minutes. Time to get your grades in quick. Please, whether it's through Facebook or Twitter, let us know. Grade Donald J. Trump. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. Well, Donald Trump stirs up some strong emotions, and some of you are texting and tweeting and Facebooking, giving him an A grade, saying he's a superstar, and others think it's an F, and some are trying to give him grades even lower than that. But it's not just Trump that stirs up emotion. I think sometimes perhaps I do too, because there is a text here from Ian in Essex, and he says, I'm giving up Nigel Farage for Lent. Oh, thank you, Ian. You are a real sweetie. You've just done so much for my personal self-confidence. Nigel, what about England? Do we really care who America's president is, says Jay in East London. Yeah, Jay, we really do. And I'll tell you what's really interesting. We care about their politics, they care about our politics, and all anybody was talking to me about last week at the conference in America was what's going to happen in France, what's going to happen in Germany. Somehow we've all got a little bit closer together. And whether you like the global revolution of 16, and of course I loved every minute of it, whether you like it or not, I think we are all taking a lot more notice of each other. I'm going to ask Halil in Chingford, please, what grade does Trump get? Is he the top of the class or is he the dunce?
So I would give him a grade A, not an A star.
Right.
Grade A. He's got a bit of a lack of mannerism. And maybe that's due to experience within the role that he's in now.
Yep.
Okay? However, he is a new face for American politics, a new needed face, really.
Why do you say that, Halil?
He's someone that was not a politician from his life roles, from his life experiences. He's coming in with a new kind of idea. He wants to shake up Washington, stop all the corruption, which I think America is renowned for at the moment. You've got a lot of hate all across the world against America just because of their, of what they do in their conspiracy and their elite in their government. I think he's going to shake it up. He's promising good things for America. He's bringing jobs back. And there's one point I need to make about the mass media, and they've constantly demonised him throughout the whole campaign. Even though he's in the presidency now, they're still demonising him. A lot of the mass media are throwing all their time at him. And at the end of the day, he's going to do good things for America. They're not. All they've done is promote propaganda, brainwashing people.
So he's got a fair point then, Halil, yeah?
I think he's got a better point. I think he's going to do good things for America. Whether or not, we think it's right to do so at this time and age. I think a lot of people are weak-minded in a way. I think that we need someone strong in power that's not scared to say what they want.
Well, I tell you what, Halil, he's not scared to say what he thinks, is he? And that's the case in public, and some would say even in private, though I couldn't, of course, disclose any of that. Halil, thank you very much indeed for your call. On Facebook, Andrew says F-A-I-L spells fail. Zafia says C for communication. Jim Green says A+ for distinction. And Ali, quite funny actually this, Ali says, I thought we'd exported you to the USA. Well, Ali, can I tell you that Boris Johnson was giving a speech earlier on today to a group of businessmen, and he said that our exports are going very well. We've exported Nigel to the United States of America. Well done, Boris. That's actually quite good, isn't it? It's quite funny. It's not totally true, though. What does William in Glasgow think of Donald J. Trump as the US president 40 days in? Is he top of the class, or is he the dunce?
I would give him an A+ with distinction.
Would you?
I think he's the greatest thing that America's had, and in time, the silent majority. I'm obviously Scottish by an accent, you can tell, and we've got a silent majority too. And every time I put the television on and follow the events in America, it's always these childish Hillary Clinton liberal supporters. They're out with their placards. It's usually a Mexico flag in one hand and an LBGT rainbow flag in the other. The American flag's usually on fire at their feet, and they're holding up traffic, trying to stop people from going home, trying to stop people from going to their work, trying to stop people with their day-to-day business, thinking that by their childish activities they will put a stop to what's happening in the White House. And all it's done is showed Donald Trump he is actually winning. He sits back and says, that's what you could have had. That is what you could have had in America. These are the people that are in the universities, the classrooms, the schools, the colleges. This is the mentality that America's had for so long, and Donald Trump comes along and says no more. And the silent majority, the same in Scotland, never get their voice heard. Never get their voice heard.
So do you admire William? I mean, is it his courage in fighting the establishment? I mean, is that the sort of thing that you really admire about him?
There's so many people in America who thinks like Trump, wants to be like Trump, but he's the only man that actually stood up, put his businesses aside and took up the mantle, like yourself, and then says, look, I'll do this crusade, I'll take the spittle and the hatred through the left, because you don't get it through the right. If Hillary Clinton had been elected, we would not have been on the street rioting.
No.
We wouldn't be burning and looting.
William, this point, William, is a very powerful one. Actually, it is the activists on the left who really do seem to take to the streets and not accept democratic results. I don't think people on the right behave like that. Perhaps some of the extreme right might behave like that. But in general, William, you make a very good point that the silent majority accept the result of elections. Thank you for the call. We've got a caller from Baton Rouge in Louisiana. Tony, good afternoon for you, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. It is. Good afternoon, Nigel. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. So, what's the view from Louisiana?
The view from Louisiana, it's a kind of a wait-and-see approach, you know. I mean, as you probably know, and as you probably covered the election, Louisiana itself, as a state in its entirety, was a red state, but Baton Rouge itself, East Baton Rouge and around that area, was definitely true blue.
Right, just Tony, 1 second, just to explain to listeners that in America, the right party is red and the left party, the Democrats, is blue. It's the other way round, Tony, for people here. Just wanted to explain that to them.
Indeed. I'm just trying to use the vernacular over here to give you an idea of the people and how their views kind of transpire. You know, because the majority of the state of Louisiana went for Trump. The people in my particular area here went for Hillary Clinton.
And has he, Tony, tell me, I mean, do you think that this all-out war with CNN and the mainstream media, do you think that's obscuring his other messages from getting through?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, he rates himself as a C in terms of communicating his message, but there are only so many outlets in where you can actually convey a message to the grand populace of the United States, you know, and if those avenues of message are blocked and are obscuring that, then you're going to have some problems along the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. The other possibility is that maybe he's spending a bit too much time fighting the same battle over and over and over when there is actually a heck of a lot to do as President of the USA, and he's got to get Congress on side to get legislation through. You know, maybe he's got dragged a little bit, Tony, into a blind alley here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, and that's kind of derailed a lot of the stuff that he's trying to get done. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's gotten some really good things done with his executive orders and stuff like that. But you can only just begin to imagine the amount that he would have done up until now had he gotten everything that he wanted to get done and his message across to that effect.
Yeah. Although, Tony, I will say this: there's an increasing number of people in America and in the and in Britain too, and across Europe, who look at much of the mainstream media and now view them with the same level of contempt that they view the political class. Claudia, you're my last caller from Grosseto in Italy. Grade Donald Trump for me, please.
Okay, hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I'm going to give Donald a C.
Yep.
Because I wouldn't have voted for him.
Yep.
I didn't like his electoral campaign at all. I don't like the slang match. I didn't like Hillary's electoral campaign either.
Sure.
But I do sometimes I like what Donald says, although I think he talks in a very simplistic manner. But when he says things like about, no, if the press are quoting somebody, they can't say an unnamed source. I'm completely with him on that. I'm sick of the press always saying an unknown source says that. I think that's fair enough. However, I do think that if he was going to put a travel ban, I think that every country is entitled to control their borders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Claudia, it's a mixed review from Claudia. It's a C grade. It's in the middle. Well, my final thought is I would give him absolutely an A for effort. He is working his socks off. But I'm only going to give him a B/C for delivery and messaging. I think he said what he's had to say about CNN and the mainstream media. Everyone knows how he feels about them. The feeling's mutual, and it's time, I think, to move on. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7 from New York, believe it or not. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you, Nigel. So, David Davis has told the Cabinet to prepare for the unlikely scenario that Britain will leave without achieving a deal. How possible do you think it is?
In terms of messaging, I would give myself a C or a C+.
Why?
So my messaging isn't good. When I see a story about Donald Trump didn't fill hundreds and hundreds of jobs, it's because in many cases we don't want to fill those jobs.
You have 600 open jobs, though, that you can appoint. What's going on?
Well, a lot of those jobs I don't want to appoint because they're unnecessary to have. You know, we have so many people in government. Even me, I look at some of the jobs, and it's people over people over people. I say, what do all these people do? You don't need all those jobs. Now, they'll be filled.
You're cutting.
Well,
those slots are not going to be...
You know, it's funny. That's what I mean about messaging. You have to fill hundreds of jobs.
No idea that you didn't want to fill them.
Oh, many of those jobs I don't want to fill. I say, isn't that a good thing? That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We're running a very good, efficient government. Now, in terms of achievement, I think I'd give myself an A. Because I think I've done great things, but I don't think I and my people, I don't think we've explained it well enough to the American public. I think I get an A in terms of what I've actually done, but in terms of messaging, I'd give myself a C or a C+.
All right, how are you going to change that then?
Well, maybe I change it during the speech.
Well, there we are. That is the prelude to what's to come later. He gives himself an A or an A+ for effort. I tell you what, I can certainly confirm that. He has a work rate that is simply unbelievable. But he marks himself down in terms of messaging. Now, this, of course, partly is to do with his ongoing row with the media, in particular CNN, and his accusation that they put out fake news. By the way, interestingly, the BBC is in the same category, and I don't know whether you saw the big press conference last week.
Leading Britain's conversation.
Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
I don't want to be rude, but you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day. When you yourself, Mr. Van Rompuy, say that the euro has brought us stability, I could applaud you for having a sense of humour. Yes, I want you sacked, Mr. Schultz, as well. I want you all fired.
Nigel Farage. 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 Nigel Farage.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
As president 40 days after the inauguration to the joint houses of Congress. It isn't yet a State of the Union speech, it's an address to a joint session. And he's going to say a lot tonight, laying out his programme, and perhaps we'll get some assessment from him as to how he's done in the first 40 days as the 45th president of the USA. But there were some hints. Earlier on today, he was interviewed on Fox and Friends this morning. This is what he said.
I think in terms of effort, which means something, but I give myself an A+. Okay, effort, but that's, you know, results are more important.
Was literally at war with the BBC, and Norman Tebbit was the sort of pugilist in chief, taking on the BBC, accusing them of bias. So it's not unknown for governments to have fights with traditional media. I think the difference, James, is this. I think that Trump feels that he can have a fight with traditional mainstream broadcasters because in America he's got talk radio, which is absolutely massive in every single state and still growing. But he's also got Facebook and Twitter and everything else. And the last time I looked, Trump had 16 million followers on Twitter, which means his messages go round the back of traditional media. So perhaps, James, having a punch-up with CNN and the others doesn't matter quite as much as it would have done 10 years ago.
The thing with the Twitter and that is you come down to a point where you're actually reading articles written about tweets he's made. I mean, it's quite pathetic in that regard. So, I mean, the news source is actually Twitter at this point. It's absolutely madness. I've never seen anyone like this. It's down to the point where people are responding to tweets by writing articles.
No, James, no one's ever seen anything like this. That's the point about the Trump presidency. I guess it's why the whole world is so fascinated. And, you know, anybody that advises the president that he should give up tweeting at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever time he does it, they're wasting their time. He's a 70-year-old self-made man. He's done everything his way, and he's not going to change now. James, thank you. James making the point that Trump isn't getting it right, in his view, with the media. I wonder what Will from Evesham thinks. How is the Donald doing?
Well, I think he's got to have an F for fake news, isn't he? Because, I mean, you know, I think he sums it up himself. I mean, he doesn't... When he dismisses the kind of mainstream media, well, he doesn't mind having his biased right-wing sources, whether it's Breitbart or Fox News, his friendly sources. Anybody who kind of challenges him when he comes out with his, you know, total rubbish on many issues. You know, look at his comment about Sweden, you know, and you followed that up with some more rubbish as well, didn't you? I mean, it was actually embarrassing at one point where you got a commentator on Fox News talking on behalf of Sweden, the Swedish government, saying we don't know who this chap is. Yeah, and that's the problem with Donald Trump. F for fake news, because he has not even once identified a fact that says that is wrong. Clearly, there's many facts he said was wrong.
Well. I mean, Will.
He was elected. I mean, when he was talking about the people who his inauguration. I mean, he started off with a complete lie, didn't he?
Did he get Sweden wrong, Will? Well, you could say that specifically by saying, look what happened in Sweden yesterday, he was wrong. But was he right in terms of his direction of travel? Was he right that there's been a dramatic change in Sweden over the course of the last few years, with rape increasing by 1,600%? He was right about that, wasn't he?
Actually, no. I think you just need to check your facts there, Nigel. There's been a decline, actually. There's a technical way in terms of the way Sweden measure their rape or in terms of their sex. No,
but he'd attacked CNN, and John Sopel from the BBC put his hand up, started asking a question, and Trump said, which organisation are you from? And John Sopel said, the BBC. He said, oh, that's another beauty. So he's pretty sceptical about the media, and I wonder whether the fight with the media, the row with the media, has perhaps stopped him getting that message through. So what I'm asking you tonight is, has he been a star pupil, or is he the class troublemaker? And please let me know what you think. Start marking now on 0345 60 60 973. Text your grades to 84850. You can score him by tweeting at LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can look at LBC's Facebook page where you can watch this show live. And I'm going to go to James in Hull. How is Donald Trump doing? What grade would you give him?
I'd give him a solid A for effort, but when it comes down to the media, it's got to be a C or a D, I'm afraid.
Well, so you're agreeing with him. I mean, he himself, actually, today was being quite self-deprecatory, wasn't he, by marking himself down. What's he getting wrong, James?
To be honest with you, I think it's not necessarily the way he's acting among himself. I think it's more... the issue resolves more with the people he's dealing with rather than the way he's dealing with them. It's come to a point where he's saying to CNN, I don't trust you. CNN are not doing any kind of response or any kind of backing down. So I think there's going to have to be a point where everyone's going to have to cool it and actually come together at some point. Because it's going to get worse. If the guy wants to run again in 2020, it's not going to happen if this carries on.
Well, James, I tell you, I can remember back in this country in the sort of late 1980s when the Thatcher government